I call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council on August 25th at 7:08 p.m. All right, and up next we have our first pooled time speaker, Karen Gordey. I need to check really quick. So for those of you that might be new to the party, pooled time is if you are speaking for yourself and 3 others, you get 10 minutes. So I do need to confirm that we have 4 people here in support. First, Pete Roybal. Thank you. Mary Jansen. Thank you. And then Karen Nan.
She's back. Karen Nan.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Gordey, the floor is yours. Start with your name and ward or name and address, and we'll get your 10 minutes started.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Karen Gordey, and I live in Ward 5. We all want safe neighborhoods, attractive design, and responsible development. But this zoning rewrite, as written, risks creating the very opposite. A government-run HOA that strips away property rights and leaves residents vulnerable. When government moves from setting responsible safety standards to dictating design, dictating timelines, that's a property rights issue. We chose Lakewood because we didn't want to live in Denver, and in many cases didn't want an HOA. Yet these first 3 ordinances create an HOA at the city level, dictating design elements with no appeals process. That's a dystopian outcome, unelected staff deciding if your home fits their aesthetic checklist. Let me start with Article 6. On paper, it looks strong, but it's riddled with loopholes. Over and over again, the language says, quote, the director may approve alternatives, end quote. And that's important to note. The person holding the authority doesn't even live here. The planning director lives in Boulder, so he won't be the one dealing with crowded streets, lost trees, or incompatible design decisions that his waivers allow. Lakewood residents will. And that disconnect makes the lack of accountability even more concerning. For example, garage design standards require windows, but the director can waive that. Tree replacement is required, but the director can let the developer just pay a fee instead, leaving us with fewer trees and less shade. Lighting rules are supposed to protect neighbors, but again, the director can approve exceptions. Those aren't protections, those are suggestions. And when our single-family neighborhoods are on the line, suggestions aren't good enough. We need real standards that can actually apply, rules that can't be bought out or waived behind closed doors. That means requiring public notice for any exceptions along the RL, which is the residential edges, lowering lighting caps and requiring shielding and light curfews when multi-unit projects sit near single-family homes, and adding parking impact checks when higher density projects are proposed within a block or 2 of established neighborhoods. If the rule can be waived with a signature, it's not a rule, it's a loophole. Moving to Article 8, the concern shifts from loopholes to real impacts on our daily lives. I'm very concerned about what this section means for our single-family neighborhoods. First, it lets developers skip parking near transit stations or in so-called affordable projects, and that may sound good on paper too, but in reality, it creates more cars spilling into our neighborhoods. Streets that were never designed for that level of density will become crowded with parked cars. This isn't just inconvenient for residents, it creates real risks for emergency vehicle access. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police need clear passage, and congestion on narrow residential streets could delay critical response time. Secondly, the ordinance allows driveways and parking pads to cover up half of the front and side yards, and that changes the entire character of our neighborhoods, replacing lawns and green space with concrete, adding storm runoff, and degrading the look and feel of single-family homes. And finally, this ordinance lowers the bar for developers by removing the parking requirements while at the same time adding costly bike rack and EV charger mandates. And that combination only pushes the higher density development deeper into our established neighborhoods without giving residents the infrastructure or protections we need. We all need Lakewood to grow responsibly, but this proposal puts existing homeowners and public safety on the losing end. I urge you to reconsider these provisions and protect both the character and safety of our single-family neighborhoods. Now let's talk about Article 12 and nonconformities. This section may sound technical, but But because most homes and properties in Lakewood are already non-conforming structures, it directly impacts our property rights. As written, this article is unfair and in some cases unworkable. We've spent so much time in this code worrying about high density and the destruction of existing neighborhoods that we didn't update this section at all. Article 12 is essentially unchanged from when the zoning code was adopted back in 2013. At that time, we had not yet experienced wide-scale disasters like the Marshall Fire, the Maui Fire, or the LA fires. Those events changed everything about how communities must think about rebuilding, yet this section still operates as those events never happened and lessons not learned. If your home is damaged by more than 60%, you may be forced to rebuild under today's zoning and building rules, not the rules in place when your property was built, if the rebuild process is not started within 18 months. But let's be honest, I don't care how much money you have in the bank or if you have the best insurance company in the world, if Lakewood faces a Marshall Fire or Maui-type disaster, 18 months is not realistic. Permits, insurance claims, supply chains, contractor shortages, it all takes years, not months. We're almost at 4 years past the Marshall Fire, and only about 70% of the structures have been rebuilt. The 2-year anniversary of Maui just occurred, and only a handful of structures have been rebuilt. We need a disaster clause in this section, or at the very least, the clock should stop once a homeowner has applied for permits. Otherwise, this punishes families who are already going through the worst moments of their lives. This code also says if an accessory building or structure like a garage, shed, horse barn, or even an accessory dwelling unit is more than 60% destroyed, it cannot be rebuilt unless it complies with the new zoning. That makes no sense. We're now allowing ADUs citywide, yet this code would stop a homeowner from rebuilding their existing one if it burned down. And if we truly value housing choice and flexibility, then like-for-like replacement of accessory structures must be allowed. This section also says if a house or property is not used for 6 months, the right to continue that is terminated regardless of the reason. So families dealing with illness, estates, smoke damage, if a catastrophic event occurs, or financial hardship, could easily lose longstanding property rights through no fault of their own. Another serious flaw is the authority given to the director to shut down any non-conforming use or structure deemed, quote, detrimental to health or safety, unquote. But those words are not defined. Currently, unsafe is determined by the city building inspector under the International Building Code, and that definition includes structural hazards, fire hazards, health risks, and that makes sense. But if new requirements like wildfire hardening created as a result of SB 23-166 or defensible space are later added into code, there's a real risk those could eventually become criteria for declaring homes unsafe. That will not only threaten property rights, but also add major costs for homeowners at a time when affordability is already in crisis. We're already seeing this trend in nearby cities. Boulder and Colorado Springs have adopted the Wildfire Urban Interface Code, which is known as the WUI Code for new construction. Boulder is discussing applying it to existing homes in 2026. Just last month, Littleton adopted it for both new and existing housing with amendments. Lakewood isn't talking about it yet. However, there is a mandatory compliance date of July of 2026. Residents deserve to know whether failure to comply would mean a fine, a permit denial, or at the most extreme, an unsafe designation that could jeopardize their right to occupy or rebuild their home. This isn't about opposing safety. We all want residents safe in their homes, but safety and design standards must not become backdoor tools to strip away property rights. I urge council to 1, define unsafe clearly, 2, extend realistic timelines for rebuilding after a disaster, and 3, remove vague architectural design mandates that turn our government into a forced HOA. The bigger picture is this. People who built their homes and businesses legally should not have their rights chipped away because the city keeps rewriting the zoning code. Families should not lose property rights because of a storm or fire. Owners should not be blocked from rebuilding what they lawfully had before. And the city should not hold homeowners to vague standards or impossible timelines. Article 12, as written, weakens property rights. It penalizes people when disaster strikes. It prevents like-for-like rebuilding of accessory structures, and it gives too much unchecked power under the name of safety. I urge council to revise this section, add a disaster clause, allow accessory structures to be rebuilt, and tighten the safety language so it protects the people, not undermines them. Finally, I urge council to consider a residency requirement for department heads, especially the planning director. Decisions that reshape our neighborhoods should be made by leaders who live with the outcomes, not by the people commuting in from other cities. And with a publicly reported salary of $240,000 a year, affordability is not the barrier. Lakewood deserves leadership rooted in Lakewood. Lakewood residents deserve clear, fair, and limited government, not a zoning code that overreaches into our homes, our sheds, and our property rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We actually drafted this over the last 2 hours in response to one of the public comments that came in. The concern was raised in the comment that pooled time about the, I think, admittedly extreme case of a major natural disaster or fire resulting in sort of devastation, and the worry about the way that the nonconformity section was drafted, not giving folks enough time to rebuild. So the citation for this is 17.12.2.1. Non-conforming buildings or structures. There's actually an email from me in all of your inboxes in the last hour or so that has the suggested language of this text. We've had a chance to run it by Mr. Parker and the city attorney. The impetus for Councilor Ken Cruz actually suggested that we see if we could do something about this, and we're proposing this. So the amendment reads as follows: Section C, restoration of damage. Part 1 proceeds as written until you get to the second half, and within the pre-existing structure boundaries, this is still as written, provided that the repairs or rebuilding do not increase the degree of nonconformity, and provided that insert a permit authorizing and insertion such repairs, restoration, or reconstruction, insert is issued and insertion within strike 18 months, insert 2 years of the date of such damage, and in case of hardship, the director shall have discretion to extend this period for an additional year. So in other words, we're making three very technical changes. We're basically saying that it's after a permit, the relevant deadline is when a permit authorizing the repairs is issued. It's not when the repairs get made. We're giving them 2 years rather than 18 months, and we're giving the director the flexibility to extend by an additional year in the case of hardship. Then section 2, strike entirely, which this was the concern about the ADU that gets burned and can't be rebuilt. Strike section 2, replace with a non-conforming accessory building or structure that is damaged or destroyed by fire or any other natural disaster may be restored in accordance with 17.12.1.3. In such case, the accessory building or structure may be reestablished to the extent that existed before the time of damage and within the pre-existing structure boundaries, provided that the repairs or rebuilding do not increase the degree of nonconformity, and provided that a permit authorizing such repairs, restoration, or reconstruction is issued within 2 years of the date of such damage, and in case of hardship, the director shall have discretion to extend this period for an additional year. So it perfectly mirrors section 1, but for ADUs. So that is the amendment I now move, and if there's a second.
Second.
That passes 9 yeses, 2 noes, the noes being Councilor Isabel Cruz and Councilor Mayo Guerrero.